Good morning, Clayton. Thoughts from Sunrise here. Going to do a quick little talk on the reflection of relationships. And I'm listening to Course in Miracles again this morning. This is a contemplative practice that I've been doing for years. Every time, it's not perfect at all. And it's very deep practice, and every time it gets deeper and deeper. And then the passage that I listened to this morning said, would God make you responsible for creating meaning of the world? And if so, it would be meaningless. And what I take from that is that if I were to give meaning to the world, if I was to take whatever events are occurring in my life, the events that I see going on in the world, and create meaning for it, it's really based on limited life experience. Like out of all the trajectory of mankind and the history of civilizations, where would I have all of the information and all of the knowledge to create meaning over an instance in my life and how I see the world, how I see how people treat me, or how I'm treating others, and so forth. And it reminds me of my first meditation on Thoughts from Sunrise. Let's see if this is visible there. Yeah, Thoughts from Sunrise, issue 1, the first meditation, and I keep going back to this. This one, it seems as if it's the only one I ever needed to write. And for myself, these books were not written to prove to anybody else anything. These books were really a deep dive for me to understand, because these meditations came up, I captured them, and then eventually I shared them. But also they're a continual thing for me to go back to. So, until I've somehow perfected my life. But it says, life more often than not shows untruth in an effort for one to discover truth. That's how the contrast of duality works. Do not personalize the nature of the showing. It is a gift to waking up to a deeper reality. When truth is discovered, the contrasting appearances merge into one. So I have to keep going back to that, because that do not personalize the nature of the showing, I think is such an important thing to understand. And this comes in relationships, because in relationships we have that closer reflection that's showing us who we are constantly. A stranger, it's easy to say it's just a stranger, I'll never see them again. But in relationship, like your family, your friends, and then it gets even closer with your lover, your husband, your wife, your kids, there is this more, the mirror is closer. So, and it's harder to get away from, the stranger on the street. I'm never going to see you again. So it's easy to be nice. It's easy to not overlay too much meaning other than stranger. But when you get into your closer personal special relationships, it's much more difficult. So we easily, react to something and then say, it's you made me feel this way. You did that. And that's not okay, because it doesn't match with the meaning. Like the meaning I give it isn't good. So you are the problem. And I've been meditating on this quite a bit. I think it's obvious that I've gone through, and I think I shared, been going through some really challenging times inside myself, coming to a deeper understanding of these things. And the meaning, when we are reacting to something, let's say we come to a challenge in a relationship, and we have this response where we shut down, we close down. It's the other person is pushing my buttons. Well, I have the buttons. They're in me. And this other person is the gift, because they're bringing it up. They're showing me my buttons. And not on purpose. It's not like in partnership we sit there and say, these are your buttons. Okay, sometimes people do, and that is, I think that has some classifications that I don't want to get into. But most of the time we're doing this unconsciously and just automatically, because we've created this story about life, this meaning, and mostly informed from, say, our old traumas or old hurts. A lot of times, though, people, there's a lot of people that have had good nurturing, good stable development, and they're able to go about life in a more peaceful manner, and not run across too many challenges. But we still come across challenges. We still think, you get fired from work, and you think, oh, it was my boss did this to me, or my coworker made the environment unsettling, or something. Sometimes you come across challenges in your relationship. I don't think anybody skirts through life without any great periods of pain and suffering or opportunities for growth. But this not personalizing the nature of the showing is important to remember and oftentimes hard to practice. That when we get triggered, well, we're being triggered from this meaning that we've created, whether consciously or unconsciously, and it's developed over time. And so, if we take our childhood wounds that have informed us how to protect ourselves in order to survive, and we haven't gone beyond that, and I think it's been shown we operate about 95 to, I'd say 98% unconsciously in the world. It's this automatic operating system. We know that it gets set in place from 0 to 6 years old, 0 to 7. Like the church used to say in old times, show me a child at 7 and I'll show you the man. Because even the church in these ancient spiritual teachings recognized that from 0 to 7 is your basic operating system. And that's basically, if you think about back in the day when we had our clans, you needed to know how to survive. Like the survival of the body, this is friend, this is foe. And when you're going off to the wilderness, for the men when they're going off hunting, you had to know what was dangerous and what wasn't in order to survive and to procreate and make it back alive to continue on the evolutionary chain. And one of the things that I think it's hard to recognize because we identify with the body as a separate, autonomous being, and over time, what's hard to see is that those antiquated survival systems in the world we live in today are probably, antiquated, not necessary anymore. And it doesn't recognize that our emotional, our psychic, and our spiritual development have all developed, but all at different rates. And so we're still in this body with these other levels of development that have occurred at different rates. Gurdjieff would call it the houses. We have these 4 houses coming through this body, and they're all acting at different times, except since we experience the body as one and this individual being, it seems as if it's all happening now. And so when something happens and we get triggered, we think it's all happening now, when really our response is based on this old antiquated operating system, which has been informed by a survival mechanism. So in very healthy people that are well developed and fully integrated, this isn't a big deal. They can just not respond. I think this is in psych. If you go to therapist often, you probably learn this, how to not react to a situation, and take a breath, get some space. And in others that have more trauma in their lives, there's not that cultivation of that automatic, ability to withdraw oneself from a heightened situation. Instead, there's this reaction, and this reaction is from these old wounds that set a belief system that created the meaning. The world means it's dangerous, or the situation when I'm being confronted, it means that I'm in danger, so I have to protect myself. And I do that in relationship in modern times, not from pulling out a sword, and some people still do. Some people still resort to violence as a response of this defense mechanism because they're under threat. But in a regular, say somewhat healthy or somewhat developed situation where it's just, people, lovers coming together, I can close myself down and protect myself because of that, that wounded child inside that, didn't receive the love or the nurturing or the guidance in how to respond in a healthy way to an internal challenge to these wounds that haven't been healed. When we personalize the nature of the showing, we're saying that you did this to me. You made me feel this way, and then I am protecting myself from you, and I do that through withdrawal. I do that through accusation. I do that because I'm casting off the ownership of this feeling onto you and making you responsible for how I feel. So if you think about in your relationships, when you come across things, and usually there's a battle of it's more of a power battle to be right and justified. And so as long as I can say you did this to me, you lied, you cheated, you hurt me, you deceived me, that comes from this protective mechanism of this hurt inner child, these original wounds that shaped and formed the meaning that we've created out of the world, not necessarily by our own choice. This just happened, and then life conditions validate this as we go on. And so when we find ourselves in relationship after relationship having the same triggers come up, or we find ourselves dating the same type of person, there's a certain point where if we take a look at it, we can always say it's the other person, and that's easy. And it seems to be true, it seems to be real. But when we really take a deep dive, honest look, and I've been doing this for myself, having come into some situations where it's like I recognize these patterns over and over again, different people, and I realize that when I'm very honest with myself, is these triggers come from these triggers come from the womb, really. Unattentive, an unattentive fetus, or unattended to fetus, unable to scream out and to get attention during chaos. And then in the childhood, into the abuse and the neglect. And then throughout life, all these patterns start re-emerging. And there's this continual response to say, oh, life is doing this to me. So it might feel like we're kind of floundering around and life is happening and we're reacting to life because of how it's coming at me. And it's showing me all these things that I don't like. And then I internalize it and say that I'm bad. When I take away the personalization, and I don't say like you're doing this to me, and I take a look and I see like, in a way I'm doing this to myself, because this is through my interpretations that I've taken on, the meaning that I've created, that has been created and that I've continued to create of things. It sets up this barrier of communication between myself and others. And I think Joseph Campbell talks about this in a bit. I haven't read much Joseph Campbell, but I have a somewhat of an idea about what he talks about in this idea that we're a dream. And this makes a lot of sense. Course in Miracles talks about this as well, about us being a dream. And it's as if I'm the director and you are the actors in my dream, but then you are the director and I am the actor in your dream as well. And we forget that we have this dance going on, that we've each cast each other in this role in our lives. And when we are, yes, we've cast the good guy and we've cast the villain. And that doesn't mean that's who we are. It's a role that we've agreed to on some level. And I think on another level, we've agreed to this in order to become free from it. I wouldn't purposely, knowingly cast someone as the aggressor in my life. And I know that because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be the aggressor in someone else's life. It doesn't feel good to reflect back that character in someone else's life. Because I think under the surface, deep down under the surface, there is that child. There is that original innocence, that unharmed youth, innocent youth, that is full of love, wanting to be love, express love, joyful, that undamaged child, that is at a deeper level below the damaged child. The damaged child is this upper level consciousness that, not upper level as in higher, but surface level of consciousness that's based on these antiquated patterns of survival. So in relationship, this reflective quality is how we receive the other person when we close down is based on this fallacy that we need to protect ourselves. In growing in a relationship, and this stuff is so fresh for me, it's taken on a whole new understanding because it keeps getting closer and closer and closer to home. And this last period that I went through, like, became so crystal clear of how this works. Like, these things I've applied, and then I get into a relationship, and they're loosely held, and they're very cerebral. But then when the pain comes in, and in yesterday's video, I talked about how I dug into this pain. I looked at it. I looked into this cavity in my chest, this deep black hole, this frightening deep black hole. As I saw that innocent little child in there, and that is something that is within us, and that is something that is tapped into the eternal innocence of the universe. And I think it's important to recognize that we're most likely not a product of just birth and death. Like this fetus that comes into the world, lives for a while, and then dies, and then kaput. With maybe some religions believe in this idea of, you suffered and now you're going to go to a happy place afterwards, or go to, fiery pit afterwards. I think we live that every day based on this meaning that we create. And then I think what makes sense to me is that even the good meaning is still arbitrary, because it's like the yin and the yang, and if we have this good meaning here and we create all these happy experiences here, the flip side of that is the unhappiness, and it's still this separation, it's still this duality that if all I'm doing is shifting events in order to feel better about myself, in order to justify myself so I don't have to visit that pain, then I'm creating a false meaning. But when I can sit with the pain and acknowledge it and dive into it, take a look at it and dive into it, I see these real deep connections, and I see these roles that we put each other in, and it's not an easy thing to accept and acknowledge, because it means that I've cast people in roles that I wouldn't want to be in myself, and vice versa. So the question would be like, what roles are you casting somebody as? What roles are you casting somebody as in your life in order to protect yourself? Because I think deep down, when we're coming together, we do have a deep desire to be loved and to express and receive love. But then it gets confused because we've created these arbitrary meanings on these old protection mechanisms. So it's really important to be able to release from these, and one way of doing that is by not reacting in the moment, which is tough to do sometimes. We get caught up in the moment, and that little kid just wants to like hold and protect itself. It's like, no, don't hurt me, love me. But then how do we do that? How do we open up in the moment and know that we are loved and receive that from the other person? Because when we've cast this other meaning on that we're asleep to. This has been a really eye-opening period for me, where I've seen this even deeper and seen my responsibility in how I've cast certain people in my life to reflect this back. And I know this is a two-way street, because either party that reacts is reacting from this place of protection way before our bodies ever came together. And you can do this in close relationship, and you can expand this to the world. You can expand this to the judgments that we have on the world stage, countries, races, politicians, all sorts of, work, whatever, all sorts of stuff. We just created this meaning in order to justify ourselves, to cover up and mask these original wounds that we have, and this pretending that we're these separate individuals trying to survive. That is not thriving, let's say, and I know this from experience, is when there's not thriving in one's life, there is this story of this hurt, and this story that then perpetuates itself time and time again, and it reinforces that, which then it's so easy to say, look, this is what it means because it keeps happening. But as I've been diving into this Course in Miracles again, and it's just revealing more and more that the state of the world is really for forgiveness. All of these things, it gives us a chance when we get see someone in a light that we wouldn't want to be in ourselves. We get to see like, oh man, I cast that role for you, and I'm sorry. And we have to find forgiveness. And I know this is a practice that I'm working through, is finding complete forgiveness and surrender, because there is a level of ourselves, and I know this to be true for me, and I know this to be true for others, that there is that level of ourselves that is pure, it is innocent, the intentions are good, and we're there just in our own confused way, working through life to send and receive this love, to get this nurturing, to give the nurturing. And when we hold on to meaning that we've created in protection, not only does the other person show up as that through how we interpret their actions, it doesn't allow us to see that what they're doing is kind and loving. I've been on both ends of this. I've been on the giving end of judgment. So judgment and seeing my old hurts, my guilts, my shames, and making the other person responsible for that. And then I also know that I have been that person for someone else because I wasn't awakened enough to not react to my old wounds. And so my actions appear to others as acknowledgement of the meaning that they've created as well. And I see this is how we help to heal each other and help to heal the world, is the possibility that if we can pull the other person out of the role of our own guilt, and that it takes tremendous inner strength to look at oneself and to be honest with oneself, to acknowledge like, yes, I cast you in this role. It's really hard to accept because, now I'm taking responsibility for my entire experience. I can no longer blame you for what you did to me or what I think you did to me, let's say, because, and this is where, it gets confusing because I'll be accusing you of doing something, yet deep down, your intentions may be your pure intentions are to send and receive love. Your interpretation of the events would be, oh, this person doesn't care. This person doesn't, if I think someone doesn't care about me, if I think that someone doesn't care about me when they're showing up, I'm interpreting it through this hurt child that is protecting itself and unable to be vulnerable, unwilling to be vulnerable because it's scared. If someone else receives me as not caring and goes around telling that story, that would be from that place of hurt. The same thing. This is a two-way street. We always receive our reflection, and I know that my intention is to love and care, and to give and receive that. And we end up in a battle because we're interpreting through this confused mind, through this hurt mind, and then we have to justify and defend and kind of protect the story that we built about ourselves in order to not look at that pain. As I've looked at that pain and I've started, dove more deeply into it, I can see how the negative experiences of my life, I can see my responsibility. I see the role that I've cast on someone, and it's really difficult to look at. It's really challenging sometimes because, like I said, I would not consciously want to put this on someone else. This has been one of the reasons why I've been writing Mirror Mirror, the yet unpublished book, or soon to be published book. But at a certain point in my life where there was so much pain, a suicidal pain, where I found myself at the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge, ready to end everything because of this confusion. And I drove away from the Golden Gate Bridge, having committed to look at life in a different way, knowing that if it didn't work, that I could always go back. The bridge will be there for my lifetime, as far as I know, unless there's a massive earthquake, then maybe find a different location. But I recognize that if there's this possibility of continuation, if there's a possibility of another life, if there's a possibility of some sort of deeper connection that we have, that pain that I felt, I would never want to inflict on another person, because that internal pain is so traumatic and so painful that this became my life's purpose, is to not inflict this. And the more painful part is when I step back and I recognize that I've continued to do that, where I continue to cast these roles from these unhealed wounds, to not be able to receive the love, and then hold someone to that. And I challenge you to take a look at your own life to see how you're doing that for others as well. My role is to take responsibility for myself, and then your role would be to take responsibility for yourself. And when we're in a relationship and it reflects back these negative demeanors, then it's important to take a look at the meaning in the past that you've created that's being overlaid to not be able to receive. And to actually, what we do is we keep the other person from actually being able to do that, to show up as what we need, because of these stories. This is how deeply the connections go, and how unconsciously most of life is. Because most of life we're just reflecting back. Most of life we're automatically reacting to the world through these old antiquated belief systems. When we become awakened to that, we can start to forgive the past and release each other from these roles that we've cast on them. This is an active process for me right now, is looking back on my life and looking honestly at all of these times when I've cast someone in a role that I wouldn't want to be in myself, and starting to release from the tension. Like it's an act of surrender, and this inner tension of in the story of that hurt, of that neglect, or of that mistreatment, and so forth, in order to free the other person in my mind. Because how we hold someone in our mind oftentimes is how they show up, because of this unconscious automatic nature, this more mechanical nature of the world. So the role of working on oneself is to take accountability for this internally. Sometimes I think in a 6-step or a 12-step program, there's actually a stage where you have to externally do this, and I've done this for some relationships in my life where I've actually reached back out, acknowledged, I put myself in their shoes, and I've acknowledged, like, hey, I can see how my actions and behaviors have held you to this role. Maybe not those words, but words are a funny thing in trying to convey meaning. Oftentimes confused. In the church, I think in the Bible, it's called Babel. It's the confusion of tongues. We're trying to express ourselves and explain ourselves when really it just comes out. The hard thing is if it gets received in a manner of protection, then I can't really hear the communication that's going on. There's always this communication that goes on between the lines as well. And it takes a very refined reception, a nuanced sense of attention to receive what's hidden between the lines. And often hidden between the lines is the pain, is the hurt, is the desperation, and so forth, that we get to work with. This is a hard concept to grasp sometimes. This is like 1,000 pages, a year-long contemplative practice. That's only the beginning. Like when you go through this and it ends, it says this is just the beginning. It's not the end. And so you do this practice, and then like that starts the first day of the next period of your life. And each time you do it, it's still the beginning. We're always at the beginning of this. So that, I'm sure, is confusing, not clear, but this is a lifelong process, I think. This act of forgiveness, this act of surrender, this act of attempting to come together to experience this deep, profound love that they say is all pervasive in the universe, and is our true nature, But oftentimes we don't actually get that in a very deep way. So I think I'm going to stop there and not add to the confusion. But I'm going to keep working through this and keep talk. As I talk about it, it helps me to refine this stuff, and also this is a way for me to connect, and hopefully there's some help or some sort of recognition that these are things that we all go through in a way, in trying to understand our place in the world. So that's it for now.